everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Yesteryear. Yesteryear is one of those books that has hit the mainstream. It's all over Book Talk, all over BookTube, and there was a ton of marketing for this book. It's been billed as the first novel about a trad wife. There are supposedly a lot of inspirations from various religious beliefs in the US, like very high conformity, high effort religions, so like Mormons and whatnot. And I was really interested in reading this just because there was so much hype. I read it with my friend Karen, and we were on holiday together, and we finished it at the same time. So it was really fun to discuss the book as we were reading it and finishing it at the Airbnb. But basically, in a nutshell, we are following the main character, whose name is Natalie, and her kind of journey from college into deciding to own her own ranch with her husband Caleb, and then getting pulled into this social media whirlpool and becoming really famous. That's the first part. The second part, there is a big twist. I would recommend reading the book before you read anything about it. I feel like that is the best way to go into reading anything. But given that it's so hyped and that the twist is on the back cover of the book, I am going to be talking about it in this video. So if you want to be a purist, I would just click out of this video now and go read the book. But if you're just curious and capo and you want to watch videos about it without reading it, basically in the second part, the main character Natalie finds herself in the 1800s. So she's sent back to the time where being a trad wife was just literally being a wife. And I think the premise is she is sleeping in the bed that she made, because in the modern time she's cosplaying as this very traditional wife and mother figure, but then in the second part of the book she has to actually live out that life. So there's that dystopian twist, and then this I won't spoil. Later in the book, you find out whether that's kind of a science fiction twist and she's really back in time, or is there another reason for why she thinks that? Is she having a mental breakdown? Is her brain splintering? There are all these different reasons I feel that you could think of as a reader to try and explain how that shift happened. So I'm going to give you my thoughts, and then I'm going to respond to some of the criticisms online. For me, I actually really enjoyed this book. Do I think it's a perfect book? Definitely not. But it has kind of the same pulpy, engaging writing style that I really liked in Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. And I think there's some similarities there, because both Yellowface and this book have a really unlikable main character, and it's also a very selfish, kind of impulse-driven young woman as the main character, and you're privy to all of her toxic thoughts. So to me, I find that to be a very ripe subject matter, and something I love when it's on the page and when someone actually writes about it. And so I do feel like Natalie is definitely an anti-hero and is shown to be a really terrible person. So that I found an intriguing character to interact with. I don't know if Caro Burke necessarily did a ton of characterization in making her main character well-rounded and super empathetic. But to me, I don't know, I feel a lot of books have flawed main characters, and we don't have to see the good side in every main character or fully be able to see ourselves in every main character or empathize with every main character. So I thought Natalie was interesting, and I thought the theme was really gripping. I'm someone that went down a huge rabbit hole on Mormonism 2 years ago. And my favorite Mormon YouTuber, she's an ex-Mormon. I've watched so many of her videos. Alyssa Grenfell. I've probably watched more than a dozen 35 to hour long video essays by Alyssa Grenfell, where she talks about Mormonism as a high conformity, high effort religion. And I just found it so fascinating. And I also went down the rabbit hole. I still follow Ballerina Farm. Like, I watch Ballerina Farm's content, her short form and her long form content, and was super into reading all of the like Reddit posts and a New York Times article about Ballerina Farm. So for me, the subject matter was really interesting. There's themes of like child exploitation as well as women who live in these lives and the patriarchy that they're buying into. It also, in that sense, in terms of like the child rearing, because a lot of these women have tons and tons of kids, I think it was supposed to be inspired by families like, remember that show on TLC, like Meet the Duggars? I forget what sect of Christianity they are. That was kind of the inspiration, I feel like, for Natalie and the life that she's living. But I think the interesting thing that Caro Claire Burke does is, and this is where I actually think Yesteryear is kind of contributing to the discourse instead of just exploiting it or profiting off of it, which, by the way, I think it's fine to profit off of these trends. But anyway, one thing I really do feel like she's contributing is showing how Natalie almost accidentally slips into this lifestyle and the level of discomfort and confusion that Natalie has. It's not like Natalie, I mean, there are some very heavy-handed statements that Natalie makes, like a woman should be like XYZ, and she definitely is informed by some kind of overly traditional mindset. But at least when it comes to deciding to own a ranch, that's really born out of the fact that her husband's useless and she's trying to figure out like what she can engineer to get him to feel happy and also self-satisfied and not be like completely useless. So that's kind of just a slippery slope that she falls into along with her father-in-law. They concoct it. And then also the social media fame is not portrayed as something that was intentional or conniving from Natalie. She just accidentally falls into it. She sees like an advertisement for how to use Instagram or Facebook ads, and there are a bunch of other women and they're all discussing it. And actually what makes her viral is some really right-wing YouTuber who's promoting traditional values finds her page and then blows it up. And he makes all these claims about her that she never made about herself, like everything she farms and makes in her recipes is organic, or like she doesn't have any nannies. Like, he asserts all these things about her. It's not as if she's saying it. I'm not trying to absolve her of any guilt. She's obviously still living a lie to some extent, but I think it was actually nuanced and interesting that Caro Claire Burke depicts Natalie as like accidentally falling into this lifestyle. That's what I think. Now, for some of the popular criticisms, I really think people have trouble like actually reading the thing. And one of my favorite YouTube video essayists, Siobhan, or I'll include her YouTube handle below, she has a few videos along this theme, which is where there's always this uproar. Like, one video that I can remember recently from Siobhan on this topic is how there is all of this sensationalism around Lena Dunham's memoir, Famesick, and all of these things like were pulled out. And it's so clearly done for clickbait and to create a flashy headline. But when you actually read the thing, you realize like, oh, not only is that way out of proportion, that's actually like the opposite of what Lena Dunham was trying to do or what she said in her memoir. And so I feel like this is really rampant with the decline of people's attention spans and then that desire to just get a dopamine hit and read like a flashy headline. People don't read the actual thing. So there was all of this buzz and discourse about Yesteryear. And in this case, I do feel like people did read the book, but a lot of the marketing, I think, is what tripped people up. Like, Anne Hathaway already optioned the book to become a movie. Like, our imagination is really captured by this idea of trad wives. And because Caro Claire Burke was an online writer and did do a lot of like zeitgeist culture think pieces before this, there was this overriding assumption or instinct to make Yesteryear something that is supposed to represent all trad wives and represent the experience of every trad wife. And also it is in some way then held to this expectation of needing to subvert or have like a very strong message about trad wives. And I chalk that up to just the kind of misleading book marketing and also this instinct that we have as a society, especially in today's age, to project all of that onto a book. When for me, I just thought it was like a pulpy book about a very flawed character. So I don't think she was like necessarily trying to critique trad wives as a phenomenon. it was just like a vessel for the story to unfold. And it was just like an interesting setting, an interesting character to have this story come out. And I feel like it's a very fertile topic for tons and tons of stories to be written. And it doesn't mean that there can only be one story written about this topic, right? Like, there's obviously a very clearly defined story that you could tell where the main character is like so conflicted, or you see how she's being manipulated at the hands of society or by the men in her life, or it's like more of like the unraveling of these beliefs, etc., etc. But I feel like that doesn't mean that Caro Claire Burke has to write that book. Like, she can also just write a fun book with a trad wife as the main character. A lot of people were also saying that Caro Claire Burke hates Natalie, and it's very off-putting how mean-spirited the author is towards the main character. I don't know, I feel like people are projecting. I think that a lot of times we have main characters that are distasteful, and I feel like the genre and the tone of this book didn't cause me to expect that there would be a really super nuanced, fleshed out protagonist, especially given like the twists and turns that happen. Like, to me, this was more just like a pulpy, engaging novel. And even that aside, I felt for Natalie, maybe this is like, maybe there's a word for it where you just naturally empathize with the protagonist no matter how evil they are, because you're the reader and they're the protagonist. There's like this inherent relationship between those two. But I still managed to empathize for Natalie, and I could see where a lot of these dynamics that played out in her life could potentially play out in my life. So it didn't feel as one note as I thought the people who were critiquing Caro made it out to seem. They made it seem as if there's like nothing redeeming about Natalie. The author hates her main character. She's making fun of people that are in this lifestyle. And I just think the expectations were off. If you're looking for like a really deep, empathetic, reflective treatment of trad wives, this is just not it. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. That's just not what this book is trying to do. But I feel like because it was the first book about trad wives, that was the expectation that was put on Caro in Yesteryear. I don't know. I still thought it was enjoyable and interesting. I got a little confused around the plot towards the end. Like, I'm not saying it's a perfect book, but I thought it was like super decent, and I thought it was really fun to read because I had gone down those rabbit holes around Ballerina Farm and Mormonism. I mean, my main critique is that maybe there were too many ideas thrown into this, because there was the whole idea of Natalie's life being fake and just a show. There was an idea of these very right-wing or traditional social media trad wives being co-opted by younger women and viewing them as feminist icons, because society and capitalism has progressed to such a state that there's so much inequality that a lot of young women kind of feel like a return to traditional roles is a way to break free from the trap that they feel that they're in now. Like, and then there was a lot about how Natalie uses her kids for social media fame or for her Instagram reels, and the relationship she has as a mother to her kids. There was a lot about like her relationship to her husband. And then there were like some weird things that happened. So if anything, my critique for the book is there were just too many like plot points and ideas thrown in there. But I feel like the criticism that this wasn't the best book or the most empathetic or the most message heavy book about trad wives is a little bit unfounded, because it's just a projection of the book that everyone was expecting and wanting. And I don't think an author should be subject to those expectations. Like, they should write a good book about what they want to write about. So those are my thoughts on Yesteryear. I would love to know what you think if you've read it. And I guess I didn't come from a really intense or high conformity religion. So the stakes are different for me. Maybe if you literally grew up in that world, you want to see more authenticity, more realism, more nuance. But I think there's space for a wide range of books on this topic to be written, and I hope there are more, because it is really interesting and it is super indicative of something that's happening in modern relationships and modern society. And I hope there's a lot more media and culture that's on this topic. And I don't think it has to fall into the buckets of either super empathizing with these women and then them realizing they're in the wrong and like having this like shining moment of coming to clarity as one bucket, or another bucket of just like criticizing them. I feel like there can be a lot of different genres, a lot of different tones, and a lot of different experimentation with this topic. So in general, I'm like pretty excited that there is this book and hopefully going to be more things that touch on this cultural phenomenon. People also really hated Yellowface, I feel like, for similar reasons. They thought that the main character was too much of a villain, too one note, and it got a bit preachy. I do feel like these books are different, but they give me the same vibe. Like, I also really liked Yellowface because I thought the main character was like really interesting, like how selfish she was, the thoughts that went through her head, and what she was driven by, and how she accidentally fell into that situation. But that might just be me. I haven't read any other R.F. Kuang, and from what I know about her other books, Yellowface is like an outlier. So I'm definitely more in the Yellowface Yesteryear camp than other styles or genres. Let me know what you think. This was definitely a very buzzy book. And then I'm excited to see how Anne Hathaway adapts this into a movie. I don't think adaptations have to be exactly like the book, and I feel like there's a lot of room for her to shape this into something that's even different from what I feel like the book is like. So thanks for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Appreciate you as always. That was Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke, which came out, I think, this year.